Welcome to this week's edition of Inter-University Debate. Last week, we hosted Mbarara University of Science and Technology, and this week, we are hosting Cavendish University. I'm your host for today. My name is Lawoko-Law. I'm an advocate, a tax consultant, and a lecturer. So, first of all, I would like to congratulate Cavendish University for making it to the quarterfinals. I know it was not easy during the inter-university debate. I am really impressed that they were able to make it to the quarterfinals. Now the universities are holding their internal debates for preparation for the inter-university debates during the quarterfinals. And that is why we are hosting Cavendish University today to hold their internal debate. So many universities made it to the quarterfinals besides Cavendish University, among which we have Makerere University, Kabale University, Islamic University in Uganda, Uganda Pentecostal University, Makerere University Business School, Kampala International University, Mbarara University of Science and Technology, Kumba University, Uganda Christian University, as well as Bositema University. I would like to congratulate all those universities for making it to the quarterfinals. This debate is brought to you by Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV. It airs on Civic Space TV on YouTube every Thursday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Let me go and delve into today's debate. But before we go into it, let me introduce the debaters from Cavendish University. So today we have two debaters representing Cavendish University. Let me introduce the first one, and that is Miss Lawoko Miriam. Miriam, you're welcome to introduce yourself to us.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Miriam Lawoko. I am a second year first semester at Cavendish University. I'm a law student. I'm also the speaker of Rule of Law at Cavendish University. I'm an active debater. I'm passionate about moot as well, passionate about the law. And I'm so glad to be on this debate discussing topics of digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Miriam. We are glad to have you. Our second debater for today is the gentleman who represented Cavendish University during the inter-university debate, and he made sure that Cavendish University qualified for the quarterfinals. Let me introduce to you Aruho Brian. Brian, you're welcome to this debate.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aruho Brian. I'm a year 2 semester 1 law student at Cavendish University, Uganda, the mighty university. Yes. I dabble as an active debater. Yes, and I'm the Minister for Public Relations at Cavendish Law School. Thank you.
Thank you. So those are the two debaters from Cavendish University that are going to help us unpack today's topic. So today our topic is digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice. What is the role of the youth? This topic has been debated by the previous universities during their internal debates. And today Cavendish University is going to debate this topic as well. I would like us to go straight into the debate. Let me start by giving the panelists an opportunity to give us their introductory remarks, which also doubles as an introduction to today's debate. So let me start with Miriam. So Miriam, you have the floor to give us an introduction to today's debate, and kindly feature what you understand by digital rights in your introduction. You have the floor, Miriam.
Okay, so digital rights, first of all, is one of the, I think, important topics in this current era that we live in. The 21st century is a very tech century, and I feel that digital rights are also a human right that we have to have access to our digital rights. However, the interesting thing is that in the demographic of Uganda, these things are not taken seriously, or they're not being implemented to the fullest of their ability. And I think this is a very controversial topic, most especially in Uganda, where people don't necessarily have access to all, even internet. So when we're discussing things of rights, we need to understand that not everybody knows what their rights are, most especially digital rights. So I think it's a very controversial topic, and I'm glad that we get to discuss it today and see how far we get, and also educate ourselves of the role that the youth can play in this, if they have a role at all. So yes.
Okay, thank you, Miriam, for that introduction to today's topic. Let me give Brian a chance as well to give us an introduction. And Brian, as you introduce the topic, please feature what you understand by emerging technologies.
All right, okay. In my understanding, in a nutshell, emerging technologies are technologies whose development, practical applications, or both, are still largely unrealized, such that they are figuratively emerging into prominence from a background of non-existence or obscurity. So when you're looking at that's with regards to Whiston and Strong, they're very good IT experts globally. So when you're looking at emerging technologies, one, we are looking at technologies, whose development has not yet been placed into the world. But then we're also looking at the other extent of technologies which are being advanced over time with regards to modernity of time and modernity of machines here and there. That is it in a nutshell. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. We will delve into that discussion of emerging technologies at a later time. Let us start with digital rights. And I would like to get back to you, Miriam. So Miriam, let us start from the point of the current status. So what is the status quo of digital rights in Uganda?
First of all, I think we need to understand what digital rights are. So digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, and create and publish, or even have access to computers or electronic devices and telecommunication networks. So currently in Uganda, the interesting thing is that we do have access to internet, but obviously most of the time, some of these rights are violated, and the Ugandan laws don't exactly stipulate, or they're not adequate enough, or they're ambiguous in advocating for our rights to have access or even use of internet, or even be able to publish or use information. Now, I don't know if you remember, during the 2021 elections, the internet was shut down. Because people don't know that this is actually a right that should be protected by the laws and be protected by the government. It's not put on the forefront. And if I remember, I think in October 2020, the UCC, which is the Uganda Communications Commission, issued demands to online content and bloggers, and they were blocking them from publishing certain kind of information. Now, I think that people don't know their digital rights as individuals. So institutions and even the government are able to abuse these rights. And I think it goes down to knowing your rights as an individual, that you have a right to freedom of expression online, and no one can take that right away from you. But obviously, because people don't know that, it becomes problematic in terms of being able to publish the information that you want to publish online. Like, I have a right to my Facebook page. I can express myself online, but you see, there is no specific law, or the laws are there, but they don't stipulate exactly how far I can express myself online, and where do they draw the line between the legal ramifications of that. So I think digital rights is a very interesting topic, and because people don't know about it, these rights are being abused.
Okay, thank you so much, Miriam. Let me move to Brian. So Brian, before we even move far, I know according to Miriam's current status of digital rights in Uganda, she submits that these rights are being abused, but the public out there might be asking themselves, what are those rights that fall under digital rights? What are the rights? What is the legal framework that governs digital rights in Uganda? So I would like you to elaborate on that.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, one, I'd like to second what my comrade Miriam has said. That is with regards to one, people not being aware of their digital rights, especially in a nation like Uganda. Yes. To refer you to 2021, in March 25th to be exact, one journalist called Frank Tisache, who works with the Observer, made a report stating that Ugandan internet users were unaware of their digital rights. Yeah. So this was made by a report through an interview with a civil society organization called the Unwanted Witness. Yeah, and they indicated that Ugandans, a vast majority of Ugandans, were unaware of the digital rights, yet the government was trying to pull all necessary strings to violate them. So you find that you have a nation where people don't even know what digital rights are. Because even if we were to go to the educated class, even if we were to go to the uneducated class, anyway, now to wrap it up, digital rights include access to the internet, include right to access to information from both the state and non-state actors, include protection of collected private data, include right to due legal process in case of digital rights violation, include the right to equality of all gender, also include the marginalized or inequality of gender. So if you're looking at digital rights, you're looking at a very wide scope: access to the internet, right to access of information from both the state and non-state actors, looking at the right to privacy and protection of all collected private data. You're looking at the right to due legal process in the case of digital rights violations. But now the question would be, to what percentage of Ugandans actually know that this amount to digital rights? Yeah, because you find there is no clear framework showing that these are digital rights, and people have not taken that step to actually research about the digital rights. So that would be that would be a place to start out from, because you see, when you follow the report that was made, it was a January 2021 report, and it was titled, if I may quote for you verbatimly, "The current state and development of digital human rights and internet governance in Uganda was launched at Hotel Africana." Yeah. So it revealed that half of, because you see, in this case, 547 respondents were interviewed. You get, and in the 547 respondents, we got 58% male, 41% female, and 1% of people who are not sure that they were not sure about digital governance. They were not sure about their digital rights, especially the right to internet access and affordability. So when my sister says that Facebook was closed and people actually didn't know that this was a violation of the highest order with regards to their internet rights, then that means we have something very lacking in this nation. So we cannot say that we have digital rights in Uganda if we have, when we have a social media platform such as Facebook, which is not only a social media platform, but also a business platform for many Ugandans, being closed down, and we have no NGO, we have no one coming to speak about it. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So Miriam, I'll let you start right from where Brian stopped. Issues of providing limitations to digital rights by the state. We have seen you bring out the example of the closure of Facebook, and I think Facebook is still closed up now in Uganda, and we have also seen restrictions under the Computer Misuse Act, and we have seen different restrictions coming during elections. And my question to you is, do you think that these limitations are justified?
Obviously, that's a very controversial question. First of all, the political climate that we have in Uganda. Now, I'm pretty sure the government or the people in power have reasons for why they shut down the internet, especially at crucial times when there's elections. Now, I think it's also to curb the access to information, and maybe there, because you know that the internet is something that's very hard to control. And the government can only go so much as to control what information goes in and out of the country. And the most interesting thing is that they close it at times when there are crucial points for our country and everyone has eyes on our country. So the problem is that the government has all the power to shut down the internet when they please. And the public can't do anything about it. And that also brings me to my next point, is that how does the youth play a role in that kind of thing? That's where it becomes very tricky and very, I think, difficult to control. Because if you look at 2018, when they brought the OTT tax, and we were required to pay a certain amount to be able to access our social media. Now, that was, of course, most of the youth found it expensive, because why would you need to pay to have access to something that's free? And obviously, there was someone capitalizing on that notion of OTT tax. And then they eventually rescinded it and they took it away. Now, that's what makes digital rights, I think, a very interesting topic. We don't know our rights as people in terms of digital rights. We have no education about it. And I think that's how the government is able to misuse that and take away our privilege and our right, because one, they have the ability to do that, and two, we don't have the ability to stop it. And I think curbing individuals' rights to access to the internet is a terrible thing. One, after COVID-19, most people reverted to having most of their work being done online, and even during COVID-19. Now, I think taking away those privileges of having access to internet becomes detrimental, not just to individuals, but even society in general, because the economy does depend on certain people being able to run their businesses. And I don't think the government looks at digital rights as an important factor. And it's terrible, first of all, because we depend on it. For us, look at students, for example, we need the internet to be able to access information. Now, the government doesn't realize they're not just stopping it for whatever reason that they have. It kind of has a ripple effect, and it trickles down to small things. The education system gets affected, businesses get affected. And they look at it, I think, from a one angle point of view, that they want people to be able to stop having information from the outside world and stop information from going out. But digital rights are actually, they affect everything from every angle. And I think it's very unfortunate that we don't have, can I say, laws in place that protect the individual, and then also protect, that also bar the government from enacting such laws that bars from our privilege to have access to the internet. So yes, that's my submission.
Okay, Miriam, before you go, before I bring Brian into the discussion, I would like to ask you a question out of your submission. Yeah. So there are issues of cyber harassment, then there are issues of spreading wrong information on the internet, inciting the public on the internet, and several other vices that comes with digital rights. So if these digital rights are not limited, how do you think the government should handle such cases?
One, I think it's stipulating the laws exactly, because when you look at even the Misuse Act, some of the laws in there are very ambiguous. They don't exactly say how far is offensive. For example, when you look at things like you mentioned, cyberbullying, right? Anyone can go online and, let's say I post a picture like I do on my social media. Someone can come and make a comment and they don't know how I will take that. Now, because they have a right to post that kind of thing, as much as it is a right to post whatever you want, there should also be limits to what someone can post online concerning someone's post, or even vice versa. Now, I think they need to stipulate in the laws what exactly, where the line starts and where the line ends. For example, people need to know their responsibilities as much as they know their rights. So let's say the government, there is a law that says, I have a right to the freedom of expression. But how far? Because freedom of expression can be very, it's a wide law. it doesn't draw the line to how far can I express myself online, because if they could stipulate and say freedom of expression ends and starts here, then I think that in a way protects the people who are posting and also protects the people who are on the other end of cyberbullying. And then also making it clear to the people who have this right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression, their responsibility online. For example, let's say there's a lot of freedom of expression, yes. But then the other end of the line would be use appropriate language when interacting online, or even obey intellectual property laws of media and copyright, because they don't exactly say where the line begins and where it starts. So if the laws could stipulate how far an individual can express themselves, and when does it become illegal or against the law?
Okay, thank you for that. Let me bring Brian into the discussion. So Brian, Miriam and I were having a discussion about the limitations provided on digital rights. What is your take on that?
All right, so the IT restrictions in Uganda have been serious and have come with a number of consequences attached to them. Yeah, so maybe to rephrase your mind, yeah, the Uganda Communications Commission in 2019 produced a report that the Uganda internet penetration had reached 37%. Yeah, with over 23 million subscribers, but with only 5.5 million having active smartphones. Yeah. So the 6 million users we're talking about are active users of social media, that is with 50.4% using Facebook. Now, let's look at the Facebook alone. If we're to draw a conclusion to that, let's look at the Facebook alone. Yeah, we see that, so you find that when the internet was closed, just here recently, it affected the political sphere of the nation. It affected the economic sphere of the nation. It affected the social sphere of the nation. So when we say that digital rights in Uganda, we are not only looking at a 50-50 scale, that maybe there is a balanced equation between the people of the Republic of Uganda and the state. Yeah, we are not looking at that equation anymore. We are looking at a 90-10. With the 90%, with a 90% leaning to the government, because now the government has the higher hand. Yeah, having a government that can wake up at any one morning and then close a social media platform. Now that is the state we are looking at. The 10% going back to the people. But this, if we are really looking at digital rights and putting them to the right stock, then we are way far away from that. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So let me move back to Miriam. So Miriam, what role can the youth play in all this, in promotion of digital rights and also making it a safe space for everybody?
Well, first of all, in terms of, if we look at it from the aspect of cyberbullying, one, I think the youth have to take responsibility for their individual use online and make sure that when they're posting or having access to the internet, they held themselves accountable for whatever they're posting. Because as much as when you're posting information and you're putting it out there, remember that the laws are a little bit vague on the protection of digital rights or even protecting other people. So I think we have to hold ourselves accountable and make sure that if we're having access to the internet, we're not abusing someone else's rights, and we're also not misusing our rights online. And then maybe another thing is that, of course, for us who are young lawyers, we're the future policy makers, because most of these legislation are so vague, and these clauses are not exactly strong. They don't exactly pinpoint what the violations are. So I think the young policymakers need to be able to strive and make sure that we're able to influence and change policies in regards to digital rights. So apart from taking personal responsibility and making sure that you're not abusing someone else's rights and you're also not misusing your own, is to basically fight for digital rights, and then also make sure that you're educating yourself and educating others about their digital rights, because like we said in the beginning, people don't know what their rights are. So it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we also educate those around us that digital rights is actually a thing, and it can be violated. And then what steps can we take to make sure that our rights are not being violated as young people and as the youth?
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Brian, this will be my last question on the topic of digital rights. And my question to you is, how do we promote digital rights as a county, but also at the same time protect the citizens from the vices that come with digital rights?
Thank you. I think one of the major things as a lawyer that as a lawyer, there are some things we need to look at, yeah? So we need first one, look at the respect of the rule of law. As my sister Miriam said, that she's a very active member of the rule of law, yes? So we need to uphold certain laws in Uganda. We need to uphold certain articles in Uganda. Now, when you're looking at articles, we should look at articles like Article 29 of the 1995 Ugandan Constitution as amended, which clearly expresses the right of freedom of media and expression. Yeah. So this makes every Ugandan have a right to use internet either for expressing one's views or gathering information without any governmental interruptions. Yes. Although accessibility to the internet is not denied in Uganda, accessibility is greatly hindered by affordability and restrictions on use, especially social media. Yes, because now we are seeing that Facebook has been closed by the government since January 13th of that is 2021. Yeah, so you find that from that time up to date, Facebook has been closed. So if we are to look at upholding and promoting, digital rights in Uganda, let's start by respecting our own constitution, because the constitution is the supreme law. You get it's binding to all. Let's start by respecting the laws. Two, I think let's be considerate a 50-50 scale. What is a 50-50 scale? A 50-50 scale is one whereby we are going to look at what has someone posted, what was their intention, yes? And also at the other end, how is someone receiving the message in whatever format they have decided to use it for, yeah? Then, yes, the other things to promote maybe digital rights, I think the government should really take it upon their mantle to create sensitization. And also I call upon lawyers, advocates to teach people or to create awareness about digital rights, because I can tell you, Gender, a number of Ugandan internet users are unaware of digital rights. I gave you the statistics earlier on, yeah? So most Ugandans do not give attention to the digital rights, and they do not know them because because there is a limited, because there is a limited civic education around digital rights, yeah? And these are new things in the society. Therefore, most people cannot claim what they don't know that belongs to them, yeah? So we need to see how police works with the Ministry of ICT, with the government, with the different advocates, and then we have digital rights on the certificate. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. So that ends the discussion on digital rights, and let's move to something, emerging technologies, which is something that is very current. We have seen some technologies come out during the lockdown, and also we have seen a very high level of use of technology during lockdown by different people. I myself, I had to learn a few because I had to work using technology during the lockdown. So let me start with you, Miriam. So Miriam, what are some of the emerging technologies in Uganda right now?
Okay, so your question was, what are the emerging technologies in Uganda? Funny thing, emerging technologies, first of all, is one thing that's very, very interesting, especially development in the world that we're living in today. Now, these technologies are generally new, but also include older technologies. Now, in terms of things like artificial intelligence, 5G. So I think Uganda's position in emerging technologies is not so strong. One, I feel that very few people, like my colleague Brian earlier stated, very few people already have access to smartphones. And then people are still using analog phones. So I think Uganda is still on the climb. I don't think we're anywhere where we should be, that we should be counted among one of the countries that's actually implementing emerging technologies. However, I think in the future, hopefully, we will take part in that sphere. So I don't think Uganda is necessarily in that league to say that we actually are implementing emerging technologies in our country. Yes, we do have access to the internet. Yes, we do have access. I remember that I read somewhere that Uganda had actually built its first electric car. And in terms of how far back we are, I think we could do more, implement more in that direction, in that regard, especially even more since COVID hit and everyone turned to operating and working from home and working online. This was the time where we should have seen more of that in our country. And unfortunately, we're still not where we should be on the scale of emerging technologies. So when you say where's Uganda at, it's a tricky question. I don't think we are where we should be, but the fact that Uganda has a strong, a young population and young minds, critical thinkers, I'm sure in the future we'll get to where we want to be in the regard of emerging technologies. But for now, I think we're still going in that direction, and there's more implementation that needs to be done in that regard.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. So let me move to Brian. So Brian, you've listened to Miriam when she gave us the current, where Uganda is at currently in terms of, okay, I can see we have lost Brian for a bit. Let me have that discussion with Miriam then as we wait for Brian to come back on. So Miriam, why do you think that we are still very, very down and in terms of emerging technologies as a country?
So I think one of the problems is that there's no access. One thing that we don't have, first of all, we don't have advocates for, the very few advocates who are there for technological change are skilled, but I think the ratio to the people who are skilled in technology and the people who should be receiving it is very few. And then the second thing, we don't have access to the tools to be able to implement these things. And then another thing is that I don't think it's among the priorities of our government to be implementing emerging technologies. So then also another issue is that from the scale, I'm a woman, I'm a feminist, I'm an activist. I think still the ratio to boys and girls in terms of STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, the gap is still big. Most of the time, boys are the ones who take up STEM. And I think slowly as we move forward, girls should be being allowed to have access to STEM and also allowed to be able to implement these things. So I think the number one problem why we don't have emerging technologies is access, education, and the tools to be doing that. Because I do know that Uganda has a young population with critical minds, young thinkers who want to be able to have access to this information, access to be able to do these kind of projects, but they're not given the necessary foundation or funding to be able to do this. So I think it takes a collective effort, not only from the government, but even the schools, to be able to make sure that they're meeting this thing called emerging technologies and creating avenues for young people to be able to learn and grow. I mean, I do know that there are a few initiatives in Uganda and schools that are taking part in this, but it's not enough. They need the support of the government, they need the support of the schools to be able to make sure that they're implementing these things, and that Uganda is actually put on a scale to be able to compete with emerging technologies. Because we look at the Western part of the world. Recently, I read online, I think the BBC posted how they're implementing chips in people's arms to be able to access bank accounts and transact. Now, on the scale of things in Uganda, we're still using ATM and mobile money. So when you look at I think the gap between Uganda and the rest in the first world, or even the Western part of the world, is so far apart. So how do we bridge that gap, and how do we bring ourselves closer to be able to have emerging technologies in our country. I think it's incumbent upon the government to make sure they're implementing these things and making sure that we have the access that we need and making it a priority.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. So let me bring Brian into the discussion regarding emerging technologies. So Brian, today we are talking about the youth. So to what extent are the youth coming up with new technology currently?
I think, permit me want to first rephrase the definition of emerging technologies. Then I give you a variety of technologies, because emerging technologies have a priority, yeah? So allow me first to give you that before I come to the role of the youth. Yeah. Emerging technologies are technologies whose development, practical applications, or both are still largely unrealized, such that they are figuratively emerging into prominence from a background of non-existence or obscurity, as earlier stated. So either these technologies are generally new, yeah, but may also include older technologies, yeah. So emerging technologies are often perceived as capable of changing the status quo, yeah, and they are categorized by radical novelty, that is in application, even if not in origins, relatively fast growth, coherence, prominent impact, and uncertainty. So in other words, an emerging technology can be defined as a radically novel and relatively fast-growing technology. Yeah? So they are categorized by certain degrees of coherence, persisting over time, and with the potential to give a variety of technologies, especially under emerging technologies. When we are talking about emerging technologies, one, we are talking about the educational technology. Two, we are talking about information technology. Three, we are talking about nanotechnology. Four, we are talking about biotechnology. Five, we are talking about cognitive science. Six, we are talking about robotics. And then seven, lastly, which most people take as emerging technologies, artificial intelligence. Yeah. Now, the question is, where are the youth in all this? In the Ugandan context, I've not yet seen us anywhere. We, as my sister Lauren stated, we tried as a country to build an electric car. Yeah, but I don't think that's that. I don't think that's the case in scenario. Yes. So, but anyway, who is the youth? In which age bracket are they? Yeah, these are things we also need to look into. We need to look at the government perception about emerging technologies and the role of the youth. Yes, because when you're looking at the youth, when you're looking at people that, one, are either highly skilled, yeah, or two, have a lot of knowledge about a certain sector. However, what is the most restrictive? What is the most restrictive rope to them? One, it's either the finance or the government policy. Yeah. So the youth will probably change with circumstances, especially in the demographic, financial, economic, and social cultural settings. Yeah. So, but generally, when we're looking at youth development with regards to emerging technologies, I personally haven't yet seen the youth in Uganda. Outside Uganda, we have seen a number of them. Go to Russia, you've seen youth taking up the mantle in information technology. Yeah. When you go to the Jews, you find that the youth are leading the nanotechnology. Yeah. When you go to India, you find that the youth are taking up the biggest scope in biotechnology. Yes. When you go to Asian states, you actually find that most of the emerging technologies under robotics are being driven by the youth. Go to the USA, go to Britain, artificial intelligence is nearly being run by the youth. Now, come to Uganda. Has the government put a framework in system that can adequately enable the youth, one, to even take part in the least variety of technology? That is educational technology. Has the government helped technically on helping the youth evolve towards the similar goals? Because when you're looking at new technological fields, yeah, they may result from the technological convergence of different systems, yeah, evolving towards that similar goal. What is a similar goal? The similar goal is us having the variety of technologies emerging in Uganda, yeah, through educational technology, informational technology, and the rest, as I had earlier on, yeah, stated. So the youth in Uganda should represent progressive development within a field for competitive advantage, yes, because it's through the competitive advantage that you see the technologies being harnessed over time, yeah, because the youth will represent themselves as distinct fields in which with regards to similar goals. However, the opinion on the degree of the impact or on the degree of the status and economic inclusion of the youth in all this is one we have not yet seen coming into play. So I think the earlier we saw them coming into play, the better for the nation. So what we are requesting government. Recording in progress. So what we are requesting is government is that let them a framework, actually an implementative framework that can help the youth harness these different modifications of technology, because emerging technology comes through series, yeah, and these are majorly 4 series: a technological era, yeah, a historical area of establishment, yeah, 3, the type of technology, and then the technology timeline, because all these things now, like nanotechnology, has a timeline in which it has to be directed and implemented, yeah, and put into the pipeline. Biotechnology has the same, yeah. Robotics has the same. So we need to look at these different frameworks. So in a nutshell, I've not yet seen the youth of Uganda and the government of the Republic of Uganda enabling the youth to take up the mantle in the emerging technologies, as seen with our fellow youth in Asia, as seen with our fellow youth in modern Europe. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for that. Before you go, Brian, I would like to ask you one more question that is related to that. It's a continuation. So what do you think are some of the challenges that the youth are facing when it comes to coming up with new technology?
So some of the limiting factors are the factors that we have seen over time. And not only cut to the youth, but a big sector of Uganda. One is the government response, yeah, to emerging technologies, especially with the role of the youth. 2 is the government, it still comes back to government, the perception of the government towards the youth. But then 3, amongst all other factors, is the issue of the financial input, yeah. So we need to look at the government response as being a limiting factor, the issue of finances, and also the environment in which they're working. I get some.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So let me go back to Miriam. So Miriam, how do we promote the emerging technologies among the youth? How do we help the youth as a country so that they're able to come up with new technologies? Because as we look at how things are going, you look all over the internet and the different innovations that have been made worldwide. There is employment coming out of this, and then ease of work and ease of ways of doing things. And with the coming up of diseases and pandemic, and we have seen from COVID-19 pandemic, we have learned the importance of technologies. So how do we help the Ugandan youth so that they are able to come up with new technologies that benefit this country?
That's a very good question. First of all, I mean that even though I'd like to first of all state that even though Uganda is still in its foundation stage, even though Uganda is still in its foundation stages of emerging technologies, we should also give credit to so many initiatives that have been that are coming up and that are making it their mandate to make sure that they're educating children in tech. That's one. So I think education plays a key part in it. We need to make sure that we as a country, or even the government, is financing these initiatives that are taking the steps to educate our children in tech ed and being able to compete in the 21st century and even compete for 21st century jobs. Because like you said, even after COVID-19 and even currently when COVID-19 was going, everyone reverted back to being online. And those who didn't know how to use computers had to learn. And I think that's one of the positives of COVID-19. I'm always an optimistic person. I believe in looking at the good of everything. as much as COVID-19 was a terrible thing and the pandemic had terrible effects, the one positive thing that I can take from it is that it forced our country as a whole to be able to adapt to the use of computers, using technology. So even when kids were at home, they were forced to learn how to use computers because that was the only way that they were able to carry on with school, even at home. So had it not been for the pandemic, I don't think as a country as a whole, and especially the people in power, the government, realized the importance of a technology as much as they did during and after COVID. So the one thing that we need to implement, or even the government needs to do, is make sure that they're financing these initiatives that are taking the innovation to make sure that they're educating children in tech. So the one thing that needs to be done is educating children, because there's so many young minds that have the passion, but they don't have access. So creating access to education, giving them tools to be able to learn how to, even if it's building these technologies, robotics, giving them access. That's one way that we as a country can make sure that we're actually considered to be even one of the countries that's implementing emerging technologies. Because I think as the world progresses and the further we go along, technology becomes more and more and more important, and we do not want to get left behind. So I think the initiative needs to be in education, access to the tools, and yeah.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Let me get back to Brian. So Brian, looking at Ugandan context right now, what are some of the challenges that we face as a country that can be solved when we turn to technology?
Okay, all right, thank you. One, there is the issue of the road network, yeah? So if we had the emerging technologies as I earlier on stated, yeah? If we had the relevant emerging technologies, now here we are looking at, let's look at the aspect of emerging technologies in the sense of robotics, yeah? Robotics, one, to break it down, robotics are a branch of, as well as computer systems for their control, sensory feedback, or resemble humans in appearance, yeah, behavior, or cognition. So I'm looking at the aspect of robotics in Uganda. If we had emerging technologies such as robotics in the Republic of Uganda, we would have saved a number of Ugandans from working in dangerous environments, yeah? Because you see, during road construction, yeah, you know, first you're a farmer. I want to believe you've done some little farming and during high school. If to address your mind back to the high school times, whenever there was the day for general cleaning, I don't know if first you used to do general cleaning. Did you have that day?
Brian, of course, of course.
So you see,
yes.
During days, let me just push your mind to the days when we have a general cleaning, yeah? Whenever there was general cleaning in a school, the day after, you'd actually find that the sick bay had a number of cases of people who had flu, yeah? People had cough, yeah? People were either sick, they had a headache or something. It's because, one, the accumulation of dust, one, posed a great danger to their health, yeah? So if we had robotics under the theme of emerging technologies, road construction, one, would be faster because robots don't know dangerous environments. That is now with regards to health, yeah? So they will go in and work, and in no time you'd have perfect work, yeah, but as well as protecting the civilians of Uganda from dangerous work environments, yeah. Now we are looking at the context of development with regards to robotics, yeah. If we're to go to nanotechnology, let's go to nanotechnology, yeah. Most people shorten the word nanotechnology to nanotech, yeah. So nanotechnology, one, is the manipulation of matter on an atomic, molecular, or a supramolecular scale, yeah. So let me give you a wide description of nanotechnology, yeah. It's a particular technological goal of precisely manipulating atoms or molecules for fabrication of macro scale products, yeah. So if we had emerging technologies now like the robotics, we wouldn't have a number of Ugandans putting their risk here, because I don't know if you've gone to the UPDF sector that you know, we have the gun assembling and all these other things, yeah, you find that people's health is being put at stake. Yeah, but when we have emerging technologies like nanotechnology, robotics, you find that one, we are going to produce quality services for the people of the Republic of Uganda, but two, also reducing, as the President of the Republic said, of Uganda said, President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, he stated that we need to look at a state where we have a very high life expectancy. Yeah. So now this brings you now back to this brings you down to the emerging technology of us, the stem cell therapy. Yes. So you find that the stem cell therapy will be an intervention strategy that will introduce new adult stem cells into damaged tissue, yeah, in order to treat diseases. So you find that stem cell therapies are an intervention strategy, yeah, that introduce new adult stem cells into damaged tissue in order to treat diseases or injury, yeah. So you find that if we had certain emerging technologies that would help us in our health system, yeah, you find medical researchers who would maybe be the youth, believing that stem cell treatments would have the potential to change the face of human disease and alleviate suffering. Yeah? So you'd find that a number of Ugandans maybe who are suffering from bone marrow issues, cancer, the HIV, even COVID, yeah, you'd find that would have a number of Ugandan medical researchers, the youth now in particular, working in the stem cell therapy, yeah, one, to get a potential replacement for diseases, yeah, that is in the body with minimal risk of injection and side effects. Yeah, so you find that this emerging technology will help us build Ugandans that have a very strong immune system. Yeah, with a very minimal risk of side effects. Yeah, I don't know if you're getting my point with regards to stem cell therapy. Yeah.
Yes, Brian, you can continue.
So this will give us a very big gene therapy. And also will reduce the percentages of cancer, yeah, in Uganda, if you look at that. Now, even if we say, let's go to the artificial intelligence, that is AI, yeah? Now, artificial intelligence, if we had those research units with regards to emerging technologies in Uganda and the youth, you'd find that the youth, because one, the youth really like emerging technologies, yeah? So you'd find that youth would lead the research. That is with because when you look at AI research, yeah, artificial intelligence research, when you're looking at reasoning, you're looking at knowledge, you're looking at planning, you're looking at learning, you're looking at natural language processing, that is communication, you're looking at perception, and you're looking at the ability to move and manipulate objects. Yeah. So generally, intelligence or strong AI is still among the field's long-term goals. Yeah. So this would be a long-term goal of Uganda if we had to look at emerging technologies with regards to artificial intelligence. If only the Republic of Uganda would look at this, Madam Panelist, trust me, Uganda would be so far. So it will help us, one, break down on quality services in the Republic of Uganda. Two, it will help us break down the rate of health-related issues in Uganda. So it will give us a very good working environment, as well as having a very good conducive environment for settlement, for business, and for interaction. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. That was quite elaborate. So Miriam, my last question on the topic of emerging technologies goes to you. And my question is that how best can the youth contribute to emerging technologies? Earlier on, we looked at what the government should do to help the youth. Now I would like us to look at the youth themselves. How best can they contribute to emerging technologies in Uganda?
That's a very good question. One thing that I would say to the youth is that Uganda has one of the youngest populations. And I believe that the youth are the backbone of Uganda's future. And the one thing that I would tell the youth is that the role that they can play is to keep learning. With the little access that we have, the one thing that we can say that we do is we have access to the internet. And technology has made it so that you don't have to be in a classroom to learn these things. You can learn online. You can use the small resources that you have in your capacity to learn. And one thing that I do, I'm a champion for education, I'm a champion for learning. And when you don't have the resource and the resources are limited, I think that you should take it upon themselves to take their ideas, their innovations, and build them in their capacity. And I think the one way that you can do that is that if the government can't help you, the government is not willing, I believe that you can use what you have around you to make sure you're putting your ideas, your innovations out there. So one is to keep learning and with whatever access that you have to learning, implement your innovations and put them out there, because there's so many initiatives out there that are funding young people. For one, I would say Tony Alamelu, that Nigerian entrepreneur. He is a champion for young people who have in business, who have initiative in creativity. And if you have great ideas and great innovations, don't let your current circumstances or the current demographic yourself out there. When there's so many people out there willing to fund people with young ideas and brilliant ideas and young thinkers. So, and then once you get on that platform, you're able to advocate, because the one thing that we need is advocacy for these things. Young people have the ideas, but they don't know how to go about putting themselves out there, or they don't have access. So whatever access that you can get, use that chance and take that chance to be able to pull yourself up and put your ideas out there. And you never know, you'll be an advocate for that thing and be a champion for the cause. So that's how I think the youth can play a role in it.
Thank you so much. That concludes the discussion on emerging technologies. And we are hopeful that the message has reached the government and as well as the youth, because it is something that is really quite important. Just yesterday, I was interacting with a colleague of mine who is a young person, and he came up with an idea and created a platform where people can learn things that are not taught at school. Things such as how to write a CV, communication skills, research, and how to different communication methods. He created a platform, and check where the problem is. Funding and getting his idea to be used out there is still a problem. So we are hoping that on the side of the youth, they are able to come up with new technology, and also on the side of the government, they are able to support the different ideas that are coming up from the youth. So thank you, Miriam and Brian, for that discussion on emerging technologies. So let us move to something else, which is our last area of discussion for today, and that is on climate justice. So the issues of climate justice has been here for a really, really long time. It has been discussed by United Nations and different platforms. It's an issue that affects the entire world. It's not something that affects a small community, you know, and I would like us to discuss it. And I'll start with you, Miriam. So Miriam, in terms of climate justice, where are we as a country?
That's a very good question. I think first of all, we need to establish what climate justice is and also establish what climate change is, because the one thing that I will say is that I think climate change is a very controversial topic. First of all, one, you have people who don't believe in it, and then two, you have those who do believe in it, but there's no, I think, platform to advocate for it. So first of all, let's determine what climate change is and what global warming is. Some people would call global warming a phenomenon, a myth, but global warming is a phenomenon of climate change characterized by a general increase in average temperatures of the Earth, which modifies the weather balances and the ecosystems for a long time. And it's directly linked to the increase of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere, and it creates a chain that worsens and creates the greenhouse effect. That's one. Now, climate justice, on the other hand, furthermore, is a concept that addresses the just division, fair sharing, an equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of climate change and the responsibilities to deal with climate change. So where Uganda is in terms of climate change, I think first of all, climate change is there because there's so many people who don't believe in climate change. Now, for those who do believe in climate change, you can see the adverse effects that it has on our weather patterns. One, there's floods. Two, there's pollution. So these things are there. Now, climate justice, on the other hand, I don't know how many people are advocating for climate justice in Uganda, but I will say that recent times, when you examine our weather patterns, it's always either really hot or there's flooding. And this does have effects on, let's say, in agriculture, for example, the agricultural sector. People who depend on agriculture for their main source of income. When the weather patterns change, and let's say they planted their crops and it floods, climate change is very real to them because they're directly affected by it. Now, how many people are advocating for this to be stopped, or even advocating for it to be curbed? Very few people are doing that. People mostly are affected by climate change, but you have very few people speaking out for climate justice in Uganda. So I think what happens is that there's not enough. I don't think it's even put. It might be there, but it's not a top priority on our resource list to make sure that these things are being stopped, because people do get affected when there are floods, especially people in the agriculture sector, people who depend on agriculture for their income, their livelihood. They're just sort of put in the background. There's no one advocating for this. So I think climate justice in Uganda is something that needs to be actively done. It needs to be put on the front line if we're to save our farmers, save even our country in general, because air pollution is a big deal. I don't think the news does enough reporting on instances where people are being affected by air pollution. When you look around Uganda, the number one way that we dispose our waste is very, I think, dangerous for environment. You see people who collect their trash and they burn it on the side of their house. And to them, they're getting rid of the trash. And that's all that they see. But they're not looking at the long-term effects of what burning trash can do, because I don't think we have proper systems to dispose our waste, for one. And the way being done, it might not be seen there and then or today, but in the long term, it will have effect, not even just on us, but even on our children and our children's children. So climate change is a controversial topic that people don't have education about in Uganda. And even more so, very few people are advocating for climate justice.
Okay, thank you, Miriam, for that. So I'm still with you, Miriam, and there is an issue of poverty in Uganda, poverty at a very high level. And, it makes advocating for climate justice very hard when you look at people who cut down trees for charcoal and so forth. These are poor people. And my question to you is, how do we promote climate justice in an environment where the poverty level is very high?
That's a very good question, because like you said, most people cutting down trees, as much as there is, in like you said, people depend on things like selling charcoal, and they cut down trees for this very purpose. So it comes to a point of, how do we balance a nation that struggles with poverty, and how do we balance climate justice? And I think it's incumbent upon the government to make sure, and I think that's one of the problems that we have. Poverty, because climate justice is a problem, poverty is looked at as an even more bigger problem in our country. So the government doesn't necessarily find a balance of how can we balance solving poverty and at the same time making sure that we're not ruining the environment and damaging the environment, because people have to depend on certain things that are not environmentally friendly to curb poverty. So poverty is a problem, and so is climate change. But where do we find the nexus between, and how do we find, where's the solution that we're able to solve both, or at least try and implement solution that we can solve both? That's a tough thing to answer. And I think my personal opinion is that the government needs to find ways to solve poverty, especially for those who engage in activities that damage the environment. But then how do you, and also I'm sure the people who sell charcoal and who are cutting down trees don't think of it as a long-term effect. They're thinking about making a livelihood. So you need to come and tell them and try and educate them and say, hey, we understand your situation. You depend on selling charcoal. You depend on cutting down trees to make a living. But however, your actions in turn will affect your children and will affect your children's children, and actually having an effect on the environment around you. So I think it comes down to education and finding a better way to do what we have to do in terms of making charcoal, or even if the government could find a way to not implement charcoal, because I'm pretty sure there are many ways that we can find alternative solutions to charcoal. I remember I read that there was something called briquettes, where they use, instead of using the actual charcoal from the trees, they implemented a different way to light stoves. So I think it comes down to also finding better ways of doing what we're doing that don't harm the environment.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. So aside from poverty, what are the other challenges when it comes to advocating for climate justice?
That's a good one. I think first of all, it's education. Most people, like, even if you ask, there are very few people who actually know what climate justice is. And even more so, very few people who know what climate change is. One, they think it's a myth. Two, they don't believe it's real. So even having the platform to advocate for climate justice does become problematic when people don't even know what climate change is. So I think the one thing would be to, first of all, educate people in the population on what climate change is and the effects that it will have in a long-term effect on our environment. And I think that because people don't necessarily see it, or they look at the drastic shift in weather patterns, the drastic shift in floods, they don't necessarily attribute it to climate change. They don't, because they don't know what climate change is. So I think it comes down to educating people and saying climate change is a real thing. And as much as we are trying to earn a living, or we take part in activities that contribute, they need to know that as much we are actually the reasons why climate change is there. The things that we're doing in our daily lives. Like, for example, in Uganda, for example, they tried to initiate the policy of having to ban polythene bags, right? But to date, that policy was, I think it didn't work at all, because they're still using polythene bags in the supermarkets, in the shops. So it comes down to a point of, how are we educating people on what climate change is, and are we taking the steps to make sure that we actually implement and follow through? Like, again, the example of the polythene bags. They had initiated it originally, but they stopped doing that. Now people went back to selling polythene bags and polythene bags. So I think it comes down to education and implementation.
Okay. Thank you, Miriam, for that. Let us move to something which has been a dilemma in this country, and I also asked the previous groups to address the issue, and I would like your group to address this as well. It is the dilemma between promotion of development and promotion of climate justice. This normally comes in when, for example, issues of forests, wetlands. I mean, the state is faced with whether to promote climate justice or to promote development through industrialization. So my question to you is, given a position of authority in this country, where would you drive the country? Towards promotion of development or towards promotion of climate justice when faced with a decision to choose between the two?
You know, that's a very tough question, especially I think that Uganda does have a setback, because most of the nations who are advocating for climate justice and climate change are nations that are so far on in their economy, and these are developed countries. So I think it's not only a disadvantage for developing countries or even emerging countries to be asked to take on the role of climate change, because their economies don't have the power or the economic power to take on, can I say, advocacy for climate change, because they're currently trying to develop their economies to be able to compete with those countries that are already economically developed and are implementing climate change. So if I was given a role as a leader in the country, one, I think would have to strike a balance, because obviously before we even get to, unfortunately, I am a climate activist and I do advocate for climate change, but first and foremost, we have to set priorities for our country and see how what is best suited for our country and what is best suited for our people. Yes, health plays a role in that, job creation, poverty, all those things come into factor when you look at climate change. So I think we would have to strike a balance and find a nexus and see how can we best allocate our resources to be able to develop as a country, but at the same time, make sure that we're doing the things that we need to do as a country to advocate for climate change, even if it means promoting it in schools. That doesn't necessarily take resources. It just means making sure that the population is educated on climate change and what it is, and maybe taking those small, because you know that climate change cannot be curbed in one day. It's a process. It goes back down to the foundation of how are we implementing these things in our systems. So for example, if we say in our shops, we find an alternative to not selling polythene bags. That's not taking away from development. It's just finding an alternative for the things that we do in our daily lives, and that can help curb climate change. So yes, we're for development, but at the same time, we're taking initiatives as we're developing to make sure that we're not harming our environment, harming our planet, or even adding more to global warming. So I submit that.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Let me bring Brian into the discussion about climate justice. So Brian, Miriam and I have had a very long discussion about climate justice with a set of questions. And I would like you to come into the discussion. And my question to you comes from the point of international law. As we know, issues of climate change affects the entire world. But implementation of international law is sometimes very tricky. In terms of climate justice, you have seen the countries that are implementing the measures under international law, and then there are countries who are not doing so. So my question to you is, how do we promote climate justice at an international level?
Oh, all right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Allow me now to first take people through the concept of climate justice, and how it's recognized. So, find that climate justice, one, is a concept that addresses the just divisions, the just division, fair sharing, and equitable distribution of the benefits and burdens of climate change, and responsibilities to deal with climate change. Now, climate justice recognizes climate crises as a social and political problem, as well as an environmental one. So it will acknowledge that different communities feel the effects of the community crisis differently, and that the responsibility for the crisis rests with some countries and companies more than others. Now, how should the community, the international community, fight for climate justice? To take it back to September 2021, there was a demonstration in Berlin by a group of youth who call themselves the Fridays for Future, and as well as many participants of grassroots movements, managed justice, and asked for a system change. That was in Berlin, September 2021, to be exact. A group I follow called the Fridays for Future. I'm actually a climate activist, and yes, I concur with my sister Miriam Lawoko. I've not had a submission, but I know it was top notch. How does the international community harness on this? Small responsibilities. Let's look at the responsible conduct of how we deal with justice, fairness, and equity. When we deal with justice, fairness, and equity with regards to climate justice, then we are not only tackling one thing, but we're going to apply different ethics, research, and activism using those approaches. So we shall use different climate change approaches. That is a legal climate change approach. We shall use the political question. We shall use the ethical question, rather than just looking at the pure environmental or physical approach to climate justice.
I think it's best we looked at the different effects of climate change. Yeah, that is with regards to regards to concepts of justice, yeah, particularly environmental justice, social justice, yeah. So when we look at equality, how is it going to come in? It's going to show us the equality and human rights to climate justice. We're going to look at collective rights to climate justice, yeah. We are going to look at historical responsibilities for climate change in different nations, yeah. So we can include growing global bodies, yeah, of legal actions on climate change issues, yeah. For example, let me take you back to, was it 2017? Yes, if my mind serves me right. In 2017, there was a report of the United Nations Environmental Program, United Nations Environment Program, the UN, yeah, which identified 894 legal actions worldwide on climate justice, yeah. Needless to say, climate justice is a fundamental aspect of SDG number 13 under the UN Agenda of 2030. Yeah. So if we had to look at, as my sister the other one talks about the equitable distribution, and to harness on it, climate justice, if it's to be tackled, it begins with one as being just to the green life around us. As simple as that. Yeah. So it will just give us a main factor into increasing popularity and consideration of climate justice. That is with regards to grassroots movements. Now, let me give you an example of grassroots movements that have actually advocated for climate justice in the world, globally. There is the Fridays for Future. Yeah, that is, I think, in Bali. Yeah. There is the Extinction Rebellion. There is the Ende Gelände. Yeah. So these three groups in particular, because they formed a special focus on placing the role of most affected people and areas. Yeah. That is groups with overall vulnerability or affection to climate change. That is people such as the women, yeah, racial minorities, young, older, or poorer people, yeah, because historically, marginalized communities such as the low-income communities, the indigenous communities of color, they often face the worst consequences of climate change. Yeah. So, and yeah, when I say having the worst consequences, I'm meaning the gravest consequences. Yeah. So wouldn't want to look at that further disadvantagement of responses to climate change, yeah, happening again, triple injustices, yeah, in this state. So if you're looking at how to tackle this, then let's go back to the three aspects as we are stated: the responsibility to justice, the responsibility to fairness, and the responsibility to equity with regards to climate justice. I beg.
Okay, Brian, I would like to thank you for that. I would like to get your take on something that I had a discussion on with Miriam earlier, and that is on the issue of dealing with climate justice and poverty, promoting climate justice in a country where we have so many poor people. I would like to get your take on that. So how, according to you, how do we promote climate justice in a country where we have so many poor people?
Wow, okay. I don't know the approach my sister used on that. Because that is,
you will watch,
honestly
you will watch
speaking, that is a pretty challenging
later.
question.
You will watch her approach later, so you can give us your approach.
That is mind-blowing. Okay. That's something I've not thought about. Honestly
but you
speaking,
know,
however,
it is happening.
Yes, it is happening. It is happening. But well, okay. There are some climate justice approaches, yeah, which promote transformative justice, yeah, and this is where advocates focus on how to shape vulnerability to climate change, yeah. That is with reflection to various structural injustices in society, maybe such as exclusion, yeah, and that climate action. That climate action must really address those structural power imbalances. Yes. Now this still takes me back to, I don't know how Mimi addressed her mind to this particular issue. However, because for an advocate, advocates would look at the minimum
Okay,
priority. Yeah?
Miriam, would you like to repeat
maybe let her help repeat for me.
Would you like to repeat your take on that to Brian? And then later on, we can get his perspective.
Yeah, so Brian, what I said was that I think obviously in Uganda, we're so far behind in climate change. And because we are a country that does suffer from poverty, and you're basically telling your people that, you know, you want to advocate for climate change over poverty. And people, sometimes the activities that people are engaging in to curb poverty, because look at the people, for a number of people who sell charcoal. To get charcoal, you have to cut down trees. People depend on selling charcoal for their livelihood. Now, how do we as a people come and tell them that, you know, the activity that you're doing, that you depend on for your livelihood, is affecting the environment? How does the government take initiative and say, do we prioritize solving poverty over climate change? So I was telling Fancy that we have to come to, I think, a level where we are educating people on what climate change is and telling them about the effects of their activities on the environment, but not stopping them from doing and making a livelihood because they depend on these things that are affecting the environment to feed their families, to feed themselves, to provide for themselves. So I think it comes to a point where, how do we create initiatives as a country and let's say the government create initiatives for the people and give them better alternatives for their activities, and at the same time make sure that we're not ruining or spoiling our environment. And I'm not saying that we prioritize climate justice or climate advocating for climate change over solving poverty. I'm saying that we find a balance between the two. And obviously it's hard because most of the nations that are advocating for climate change are already so far along in economic growth. These are countries that are not necessarily suffering from poverty at the levels that we are. So they're able to advocate for climate change in their countries because their people are not necessarily suffering from poverty, like, for example, the way Uganda is. So I think it also comes from a point of where, for example, look at, they had COP26. And for those, I'm sure that we all know what COP26 is. That's basically the conference of parties on the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Now, how do we get COP26 to make sure that they're investing in advocating for climate change in these countries that suffer from poverty? So I think also the government should take initiative to get help and aid from those developing countries on how they can help us solve climate change, and we focus our resources on curbing poverty, because poverty is an underlying issue and it's a big issue, and we as a country struggle with it. So I think it comes down, like I said, to finding a balance, not saying that poverty isn't an issue and climate change should be prioritized over poverty, but it's striking a balance and finding a balance of how we educate our people on climate change, but still solve poverty, because poverty is a big issue.
Okay, so I think, thank you, Miriam. I think you were actually even more elaborate than before. So let me now move to Brian. So Brian, what is your take?
All right. Okay, yes, she has helped me get an insight into that. Yeah. So that means I'll break it down into three things. Yeah. One, that is the transformative justice. Two, that is the Paris Agreement. And three, that is the just transition. Then I'll wrap it up with responses to improve climate justice. Yeah, that is looking at common principles of justice in burden sharing. That is with regards to litigation, climate justice protests, political approaches towards climate justice and human rights. Yes, okay. As I said, I'm going to break it down into transformative justice, the Paris Agreement, and then I'll go down. Now, to start with transformative justice, you'll find that this is transformative justice in a nutshell. It's a series. The transformative justices are a series of practices and philosophies designed to create change in social systems. Yeah. So mostly they are alternatives, maybe you would say different injustices. Yeah. Yes, now we're going to something else. Yeah? Maybe when we're going to criminal law, that will be criminal justice in like cases of interpersonal violence. Yeah. However, transformative justice, now looking at the climate approach, yeah, we can use it for dealing with socio-economic issues in societies to help those societies transition away from the conflict, the to transition away from the climate burden conflict, yeah, to now an income generating, scheme of time, yeah. So why am I bringing in this? Is because, quite a number of times I think we look at more of the climate issue rather than looking at more of the climate response, yeah. We would say, oh, people are cutting down trees. Yeah. We haven't known the reason as why they're actually cutting down, yeah. So when we apply the transformative justice school of thought, we'd actually come down on boots, get our boots dirty, and get to know how has this society gotten to fare around with this climate-related issue, and how can we help them even within that issue? How can we help them now start to revive their economy? Now you're looking at revival of an economy, not on a national scale, but on a community scale. Yeah. Now to address your mind to the Paris Agreement. Yeah. Most people refer to the Paris Climate Accords. Yeah. So the Paris Climate Accords was an international treaty on climate change. It was adopted in 2015, to be specific, and it covered climate change mitigation, yeah, adaptation and finance. So this agreement was negotiated with by around 196 parties. That was at the 2015 United Nations climate change, and then from there we started getting the COPs as my sister Lawoko was discussing earlier on, yeah. So, but it's through this that they started to get profound result-oriented people, yeah. So they had economic necessary changes economically and socially, because it's helping us develop societies, maybe the poverty-stricken societies with regards to climate changes. Yeah, we need to look at what the Paris Agreement actually settled for with regards to economic and social tensions in areas that were hit by areas that were or are to be hit by negative effects of climate injustice. Yeah, then we have to look at the principle of transformative justice. Let's look at that school of thought. However, now it brings you down to the later stages of a just transition. Yeah, so just transition will be a framework developed by to encompass a range of social interventions needed to secure people's rights and livelihoods, even when the economies are shifting to sustainable production. Yeah? So primarily, we shall be looking at combating climate change and projecting quite a number of other things, yeah, responses to improve climate justice. So this is when we shall come down to the litigation, yeah. We shall use political approaches, one, to first tackle the whole ideology of political injustice, yeah. Then, as I stated earlier on, getting our boots down to the ground, to sensitize the people, to empower them, to uplift them. That is both economically, yeah, and in the field of the climate activists. I beg to submit.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian. So Miriam, my last question to you for today's debate is on the youth. So what role can the youth play in promotion of climate justice?
Obviously, the number one thing that the youth can play in it's always obviously activism and advocacy for it. First of all, I would think that they would advocate others in their circles about what climate change is and the effects of climate change, and then also advocating for, because we've seen so many young activists coming up and advocating for climate change. There's that little girl, Scandinavia, called Greta, advocating for climate change and making it known that it's an issue. So the number one thing that I would say that the youth can play is activism, education, educating themselves, educating others, and being advocates for it. So people can actually know that climate change is a thing and it's real and it's very much a problem. And it can be stopped with the small things that we do in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, and implementing it. So that's one way, advocating for it, learning about it, educating others about it.
Okay, thank you, Miriam. Brian, we would like to get your take on that as well. How best the youth can contribute to climate justice.
All right, thank you. To differ from my sister, because so if yeah, I mean, so I respect our views. They're more binding, yeah. So what ideas will be. However, just to re-echo our points, yeah, we need to look at the aspect of sensitization. You see, Madam, sensitization beats anything, yeah. So let's start with the youth to respective youth councils, government, respective environmental agreement. Let us kindly, where possible, sensitize our fellow youth, yeah, and even those who are not youth. Yeah? Now let's just because my kind request is that let the youth take up the amount of creating the awareness in societies, both locally, regionally, and internationally, yeah, so that we first have a awareness, telling people, look, this is what climate injustice means, and this is what climate justice is. This injustice is brought about by this, and some people can get, look, when I'm doing activity A, I'm actually contributing to climate injustice, yeah? So that they are not called unaware, yeah? And then they also need to know that, however, when I do activity B, I'm leading to a promotion of climate justice, yeah? So that when they're also doing things, they will do with them with a lot of caution, yeah? So you will have a society of people who are who are activists without actually knowing the activists, yeah? So they will think it was the culture, how they are helping save climate. Let's create awareness. Then two, let's empower people to empower us, combating this devil of climate injustice as a youth. Yeah, we need to look at the social network. Yeah, let's look at the spider network framework of creating awareness, empowering, educating, and implementing the things we have discussed. Thank you so much. I beg.
Okay, thank you so much, Brian and Miriam. We have come to the end of our debate for today. Let me give you the opportunity to give your closing remarks. I'll start with Miriam.
So from all the topics that we've discussed today, digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate change justice, the youth do have a key role to play because, for example, in Uganda, the youth are the foundation of our society today. Uganda has one of the largest young population. So if we have more youth championing such causes as digital rights, knowing what it's about and advocating for it, then in turn, the government will listen and protect those rights that we're guaranteed by our constitution. And also emerging technologies. For emerging technologies, I encourage the young people to learn and learn and learn and learn and learn and be the next innovators that we can have in Uganda, because most of these people who are doing these great things in emerging technologies are out there. And those who have and they're not being noticed or recognized, we implore you to come out and keep learning and be a champion for emerging technologies in Uganda. And for those who are advocates for climate justice, advocate for it and teach people about it, that they may know what it is and how we can actually make an effective change for climate change in Uganda. And those are my closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miriam, for that. And we are glad we had you for today's debate. Let me move to Brian.
I don't know why you're making me the last, but I want to believe that is an aspect of feminism. In good faith or in good faith. However, yes, closing remarks. I don't want to differ much more from my sister Lawoko Miriam, especially with the aspect of people learning how to read and research. Yeah, because if you look at what we are discussing today, digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice, these are three hotcakes. However, these are not hotcakes that you just come, run, and then maybe Kenda has told Aruho, oh, there's a digital rights session. Come and we there's I think when you put in 1 million, you'll get 5 million. Yeah, we are not doing we are doing referral programs, yeah, because what am I saying is that these three sectors, digital rights, emerging technologies, and climate justice, need you want to harness your ground on research and reading. Yeah, let's do adequate reading. Let's do adequate research, as my sister Lawoko Miriam and earlier stated. However, the second important aspect is that let's not leave those opportunities run out of our hands. Whether it's a local opportunities to grow your digital rights desire, whether to participate in emerging technologies, whether to become the next climate activist. You know, in Uganda, we have Vanessa and Nakate. When you look at climate activism, at least for a number of youth in Uganda who are taking part in climate activism. Let me start with I myself, Aruho Brian. Yeah, let's put in Lawoko-Law. Let's put in Madame Vanessa Nakate. There is a students from Aruho University. They are under a group known as Transform Africa. Now, Transform Africa is a youth-led climate activist organization. Yeah, they have Romgisha is there in Tendere. They have a lady called Nuahereza Agatha. They have a lady called Chisaka Elizabeth. Yeah, they have a gentleman called Senyondo Javan. Yeah, I think you see, at least I know some things of it. Yeah, so I kindly request us to read, research, look for opportunities, use them, and then empower one another. Because at the end of the day, all these things, if we don't empower one another, we are just debating, yeah, and we are not going to implement. I beg to submit. I'm Aruho Brian, yes, year 2 student at the mighty Cavendish University, Uganda.
Thank you so much, the mighty Cavendish University and the students. I would like to appreciate so much.
Thank you.
Yes, I would like to really appreciate Lawoko Miriam and Aruho Brian. This has been so brave of you to say, you know what, we are going to represent the team. Most of the times we have actually all the previous debates, we always have 4 people representing a university, but the 2 of you took on the heat, took time to research, and you were here with us despite the challenges with the network. I would like to really, really appreciate, and with the youth like this, we know that the future of this country is really bright, and our prayer is that whenever we hold such debates, our work plan and our recommendations are able to reach the different stakeholders, as well as the youth and the people who are involved. So I really appreciate. I would like to also thank so much Center for Constitutional Governance and Civic Space TV for organizing this debate. We really appreciate. This is a platform where young people are able to share ideas. They are able to be very informative, educative, and also argumentative. And this platform has built so many people, including myself, and I would like to really appreciate Center for Constitutional Governance for that. So the inter-university debate airs every Thursday on Civic Space TV from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. So same day next week, we'll be having another university hold their internal debates. So after the internal debates, we are going to have inter-university debates at the quarterfinal level. So these universities are going to compete on the same panel. We will see which universities make it to the semifinals. And after semifinals, we will have the finals, and we will see which university will hold the trophy for this edition of inter-university. Will it be Cavendish University? We are yet to find out. So thank you so much, and thank you to the viewers for watching. Thank you to the viewers for watching from us. I would like to say bye and thank you. See you next week.